Howdy, folks, and welcome to another day and another great adventure. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. Tonight, we're going to be doing this. We're going to be doing the Star Library and continue on with the Rocky Mountain story. It's going to be a good one tonight. We're going to pick up right where we left off. We got our guy, and he's on a great adventure across the West in the 1840s. He teamed up with a group of trappers, and they're headed out west from Independence, Missouri. Now, they met up with Indians. They encountered buffalo. They did all kinds of things, and now they're kind of building a fort or a trading post and dealing with the Indians next door. And we're going to pick up where we left off. They managed to get by Christmas, and they're dealing with a lot of the Indians right now. So we're going to pick up there and see, where were we? We were on this guy here. How astonishing feats in jugglery, because the troops, well, I should say, when the troops, the people, the traders, they were skimming money off of the Indians by watering down their liquor. And of course, the Indians didn't know that, and they were doing all kinds of things, like even trying to trade the one chief trying to trade his daughter for more liquor. Okay, we're picking up right here, a place on the White River. Okay, and of course, as always, we're gonna share the screen so you don't have to look at my ugly mug, and we're gonna get back to this, and I hope you all enjoy. There we go. That's kind of good. Yeah, it should go like this. There, that's even better. Okay, a place on the White River where the stream pours its full force against the base of a lofty peak. The powerful Brighteon of its waters was formed a rocky precipice of several hundred feet in height. It's known as a death song. The singularity of this name led me to inquire the reasons which prompted its bestowment. Ever ready to answer questions of its nature, the old chief related the following story. Yes, this is the part where the chief was telling stories. And, so you're going to hear stories of yesteryear that probably nobody's heard in, 100 years. Once upon a time, the Ogalaglas and the Burnt Thighs held an encampment upon a river opposite the high point of which my son inquires. While there, a dog soldier of the Burnt Thighs received the offer of 6 horses from an Ogallala brave for his only daughter, a sweet flower, such as one as oft pierces the warrior's heart. With her charms, when the arrows of the enemies fall harmless at his feet. The offer was quickly accepted, for the dog soldier was poor. When Chrissy Chill, for that was the name of the fair one, his daughter, of course, Chissy Chill, heard she was to become the wife of an Ogallala, she cried for grief, and so obsessive was her resistance, marriage was deferred for several days on that account. But why did Chrysachill grieve? She had looked upon a handsome warrior of her own village, and she loved him. She forgot her duty as a daughter to love only at her father's bidding. Her heart had been playing truant and had lost itself in the labyrinths of a girlish fancy. Bitter were the fruits of her presumption. Chrysachill, in the interval, contrived to meet the one of her choice, and the two fled towards a distant village, there to live in the undisturbed environment of their youthful loves. But alas, for them, they were pursued and overtake it. The life of the young warrior atoned for his treachery, while Chrysachil was cruelly beaten and brought back to her father's lodge. The Ogallala had already paid the purchase price, and the morrow's sunset was to receive his fair prize at the hand of the dog soldier. Chrysachil, arising with the dawn, plaited her hair, and arraying herself in the proudest attire, left their lodge. No one thought strange at seeing her thus gaily dressed for her wedding day, and she tripped along. Many a warrior's heart beat high and loud in the thought that a creature so lovely was become a bride of another. Directing her course to the river, she crossed it and ascended the high peak upon the opposite side. There, seating herself upon the uttermost verge of the precipice, she gazed calmly from the dizzy height. In her lofty station, with her raven locks streaming in the wind, and the matchless beauty of her person so enchantingly exposed to view, she seemed more like a being of the spirit land than an aught human. The sweetest prairie flower was near half so lovely. Her strange attitude arrested the eyes of all. Why sits she there alone? She will fall and be dashed to pieces, was the general cry. But listen, she sings. Why should I stay? He is gone. Light of my eyes, joy of my soul. She's singing this. I am not going to sing this. Show me thy dwelling. 'Tis not the here, 'tis far away in the spirit land. Thither he is gone. Why should I stay? Let me go. Hear you that I said. She sings her death song. She will throw herself from the cliff. At this, a dozen warriors headed by him who called her hand, started to rescue the sweet singer from intended self-destruction. Again she chants, Spirit of death, set me free. Dreary as earth, joyless as time. Heart, thou art desolate. When thee another, nay, death is thy husband. Farewell, O sun, vain is your light. Farewell, O earth, vain is your plains, your flowers, your grassy dales, your purling streams and shadowy groves. I loved you once, but now no longer love. Tasteless are the sweets, cheerless your pleasures. Thee I would kind death. Wasupa calls me hence. In life, we were one. We'll bask together in the spirit land. Who shall sunder there? Short is my pass to thee. Washupo, I come. Upon this, she threw herself forward as the warriors gasped at her, but leaving her robe in their hands, she plunged headlong and was dashed to pieces among the rocks below her, since the young warrior sighs as he beholds this peak and thinks of the maiden's death song. Conversing upon the subject of medicine men, he was asked why those individuals are so highly esteemed by his people. To this he replied, these men are regarded as the particular favorites of the Great Spirit, to whom is it imparted a more than ordinary share of his power and wisdom. We respect them, therefore, a proportion to the abilities they receive, even as we reverence the Great Spirit. Here the question was proposed, how are the abilities above those of others? The yellow hair counts as his soldier, the Tunga Mobilia, a man of strong medicine. I probably mispronounced that, but anyway. To him, the Great Spirit has imparted the power of healing by implementing at pleasure the disease of the sickness and discharging them from his eyes and his nose in the form of live snakes. One time, years past, our young men went to the Pawnees and came back crying, for 16 slain of their number were left to grace an enemy's triumph. It was winter, and the moans of men and maidens mingled in the howling winds. Sorrow beclouded every brow, and brave looked upon brave, as if to inquire, who shall wipe out this disgrace? Then it was a medicine chief stood up, and his words were, be it for me to consult the good spirit. So saying, he entered his lodge alone, nor suffering any to come near during the long fast that followed. Darkness has closed 4 times upon the prairie, and the sun again hastened to hide behind the mountain peaks, when calling the young men to him, the medicine man said, fetch me now meat and water, with a new robe, and bid my people come near, that they may know the words that I would speak. The obedient braves made haste and did as bidden. Flowing the robe, he sat upon it and partook in the refreshments placed before him. After eating, he arose, and 6 large snakes crawling from the robe, one after another, sprang to his shoulder, and whispering in his ear, vanished from sight. The last snake had just told his message when the chief began. The good spirit wills it that we remove from hence 3 moons, being dead, let 300 warriors return, and their hearts shall be made glad with medicine dogs and the scalps of enemies. The village left, and at the time appointed, the warriors returned. They met the enemy, fought, and were victorious. 63 scalps and 100 medicine dogs were the fruits of their success. Before dismissing the subject, many other particulars were cited in proof of the extraordinary abilities of different medicine men, but the above being the most remarkable, I have thought proper to pass over the remainder in silence. All right. Let's see where it says. There's a lot of notes here. Brought the sun. Okay. Chapter 11. Yes, we're moving right along. A large grove of cottonwood near us, day after day, was graced by a groups of village squaws, armed with axes for the procurement of horse food. The bark of this tree is eaten freely by both horses and mules, and answers well as a substitute for corn and oats. Animals will thrive upon it in a remarkable manner, and even in the summer months they prefer it to grass. The bark of red elm is also used for the same purpose. The operations of the squaws at such times contributed greatly to our amusement. Climbing fearlessly to the topmost branch of the highest tree, they would there lop off the surrounding boughs, which as much apparent ease as though footed upon terrain firma. And then the enormous loads they would carry, lashed together with cords and slung to their backs, were enough to make a giant stagger. Dogs harnessed to traverses had their part to perform, and oftentimes were they a source of vexation to their mistresses. A squaw trudging along under a full donkey load of cottonwood, and followed by a squad of half-naked children, presented a spectacle quite interesting. But this was rendered rather comical withal, when 2 or 3 draught dogs and their heavy-laden traverses reluctantly brought up the rear, every now and then lying down for weariness or squatting to lull and gaze at the companions. Now she coaxes the carcasses to urge them forward as they still delay. Then she turns briskly towards them with a stick. Get out, dogs. Wash it to eat. Chiquilla, cries the squaw, accompanying her dedication with the bows, and away go the yelping troops as fast as their legs could carry them. Oh, look at that. Dogs are the necessary appendage of every Indian lodge and generally form an equal portion of the village population. They present almost all the different varieties of the canine species, from the wolf to the spaniel, and from the spaniel to the hairless dog of Africa. The wolf, however, is predominant, and taken together, they more assimilate a gang of wolves than anything else. Indeed, the different varieties of prairie wolves hold familiar intercourse with the village dogs and associate them on friendly terms. The species used for draught is a large, stout-built, wolfish-looking creature of exquisite breed. Trained to do his duties in early life, he is generally both submissive and trackable. And the drudgery of the squaw, which is at all times numerous, without his ready aid would prove past endurance. But these dogs are also useful for another respect. Their flesh furnishes an article highly esteemed for food, and which almost invariably graces the soldier's feast and every other scene of connectivity. However, much of the squeamishness of the reader may revolt at this suggestion. Justice impels me to say the flesh of the fat Indian dog, substantially cooked, is not inferior to fresh pork, and by placing side by side select parts of the two, it would be no easy task, even for a good judge, to tell the difference by either looks or taste, unless he were previously informed. Towards the last of January, buffalo having left the vicinity, the Indians, as necessary consequence, were compelled to move. The great scarcity of provisions prevailed among them, and ourselves were scarcely better off than they. Our stock in hand was nearly exhausted, and abandonment of the post became absolutely necessary. A thing, however, which could not be performed without fresh supply of horses and cattle from Fort Platte. For this purpose, I volunteered my services, and accompanied by 2 engages, was promptly underway. No, it's good. A few hours' ride brought us to the head of the White River, where, consuming a meal, our scanty in tables from the onward, we were left entirely desolate. This was the first occasion subjecting me to the plains of hunger for so long a time. The second day I experienced the greatest annoyance, and then it was I felt some of the realities of starvation. The third day, however, I awoke, and in the morning scarcely thinking of breakfast. In fact, my appetite seemed quite passive, and only sensation I felt was a kind of weakness, and a lucid evicting lack of proper nourishment. The morning was cloudy and threatening, so after leaving camp, snow began to fall, thick and fast. The day proved so dark, objects were indescribable at the distance of 100 yards in advance. Traveling as we were over a trackless prairie, with nothing to guide us but the wind and the position of the grass. It was by the merest accident we reached our destination a few minutes before nightfall. Our sudden appearance was the occasion of general surprise to the fort hands, and after a brief explanation, we began to make amends for previous absence. At first, a few mouthfuls sufficed, but soon I again felt hungry and could be satisfied only with a double quantity. In an equally short time, my stomach demanded a still further supply, and by the next day, hunger became so keen it seemed almost insatiable. An interval of 3 or 4 weeks was requested before it assumed its wonted tone. During our stay here, an Indian family occupying one of the fort's rooms indulged themselves in a drunken spree. Having procured a quantity of the American Fur Company's liquor, the effects of the lavish potations soon became manifest to all within the hearing distance. But the din of drunken revelry ere long assumed the wailing cause. There lay helpless upon the floor, and apparently at the point of death, a squaw of some 18 years. She, in her eagerness, had swallowed nearly a pint of the vile stuff, undiluted, and now experiencing its dreadful consequences. But most conspicuous in the throng was a large, obscene, cross-eyed Indian, eagerly engaged in his medicine performances for her recovery. A breechcloth was his sole garb, as with eyes half strained from their sockets and involving in a strange unearthly manner, he stood first upon one foot and then upon the other, altering, then stamping the floor as if to crush it, through the meanwhile gathering, grunting and screeching and bellowing and beating his breast or the wall of his clenched fist. Then, with inhaled breath swelling like a puffball, he would bend over his patient and apply suggestions to her mouth, throat, and breast. This done, sudden early injections of saliva prepared his mouth for a compilation of the ample draught of water with which he bespaded her face and forehead. Sounds like a crazy dance, spewing water at her. But yet, all of these extraordinary efforts failed to produce their designated effect. The poor squaw grew weaker, and her breathing became fainter and more difficult. Some powerless restorative must be adopted, or she will soon be beyond the reach of medicine. So, through the officiating doctor, at least his succeeding antics indicated that such were the cogitations of his mind. Standing for a minute or two in the attitude of reflection, in the idea struck him. Ah, he has it now. This cannot fail. Snatching a bucket knife or a butcher knife and hastening with it to the fire, he heated the point to redness upon the coals. Then, balancing it between his teeth, at a toss, he flings it, vaulting above his head and backward upon the floor. Then, recatching it, he goes through a performance a second and a third time. Thus, the premises he addresses himself with threefold energy to the growing technique and unclouding maneuvers before described. If he had stamped his feet, he now stamps them with determination, hitherto unknown. If he had thumped his breast and beat the walls, he now thumps and beats as if each blow were intended to prostrate the object against which he was directed. If he had grunted, screeched, and bellowed, he now grunts, screeches, and bellows and yells, till the very room quakes with reverberations of Dominic noise. If he had gagged, puffed, and swelled, he now gags, puffs, and swells as if he would explode from potency of his extraordinary inflations. Then, with an air of confidence, he hies to his patient and commences the procedure of manipulation from her breast downwards in reverse. And then, again, he repeats his previous operations with sculpturous exactness and unsurpassing effort in all the variety every minute. But alas, for the medicine man, the squaw died despite the ominous of his skill. Then was enacted another such a scene, a piteous wailing as Indians alone have in requisition as vent for their grief. After the usual preliminaries, the corpse of the deceased was placed upon a scaffold beside that of the Sushisha, the old chief of whom I have spoken in the former chapter. Each member of the bereaved family deposes uh, a tuft of hair and a sack containing the meat and trinkets placed beneath her head. A smooth piece of cottonwood slab with the affixed to the scaffold, upon which were traced the vermilion certain quadrangular characters of unknown meaning, answering well to the idea of an inscription of name and age. Let's see if I can get through a little more of this. Okay. Well, another Indian died of drinking too much. How about that? Who would have thought? A difficulty occurred upon this time between a trader of the American Fur Company and the Ogallala chief, known as Little Lodge. The latter had become crazed by liquor, and being rather disturbant, was put out of the fort. But effecting a re-entrance, he again proved equally annoying. The trader then commenced quarreling with him, and under annoying the trader took to seize his arms. This the Indian resisted when the trader discharged a pistol at him, but missed his object. Here was a deadly affront that blood alone could wipe away. With great difficulty, the Indian was finally disarmed and bound. He was thus secured till the next day, when he was liberated. Still, however, he muttered threats of revenge. 2 or 3 weeks subsequently, Little Lodge was present at the soldiers' feast, and the question of war with the Americans was prominent subject of consideration. Several speeches were made, both for and against it, and though the prevailing sentiment seemed to be of an adverse kind, scarcely required a half a dozen words to turn the scale upon either side. Little Lodge rose to address the council and the friends of the whites, knowing the vengeful spirit that yet rankled in the bosom of the remembrance of his recent injuries, began to fear for his continuance of peace. Contrary to the universal expectation, he contended for its maintenance, but he said Little Lodge's grievances of his own, and they call for redress. There is one among the palefaces whose blood must wash away the foul blot that rests upon the name of Little Lodge. I know him well. He is not a long knife. The Long Knives are all the friends of the Little Lodge. Let the Lakota take them by the hand whenever he meets them upon the prairie. It is good that he do so. They are very many and extremely rich. The country is a large one and far away towards the sun rising. They too are strong for war. They have a big heart and strong, and they are very good to the red man. They bring him many good things. Why then should the Lakota hate the Long Knife? Do my brothers ask who is of the pale faces the Little Lodge would remove from his light of day? Know them, he is not the Long Knives. He is of the Washisha. The Washishas are not Long Knives. And do my brothers ask who are the Washijas? Ah, who are they? Yes, they are the French. Little Lodge cannot tell who are the Lakotas, can, but all of the Lakotas can. Who ever heard of the country of these men? No one. They have no country. They are no people. They are as wandering dogs. They feast in the hunting grounds and prey upon the game formed by the good spirit for the red man's sustenance. They steal into the land of the red man and sneak around from place to place, for they have no home and have no country. They are no people. One of these it is was who played the medicine iron speak its death word to Little Lodge, and sought to spill the blood of Lakota brave. After that he made him a fool by means of his thickened firewater. Should Little Lodge fall by the hand of the Washisha, he might fall by the hand of the Long Knife, and the nation would honor his memory. But never should the Washisha bring him. Oh, then it is not good that Little Lodge should avenged upon his host dog, this outcast of the world, that the whelps of the motherless breed may cease to insult the wrong, the Lakotas. Which of my brothers will say nay? The address was received in silence, no one presuming an answer to his sentiments. Whether the speaker executed his threats of vengeance against the offended traitor, I am yet unadvised. Having remained 2 nights and a day at Fort Platte, we again started for White River, taking with us 3 yokes of oxen, several horses, one of which was laden with dried meat. The snow greatly retarded our progress from the first and so obscured the trail we were compelled to travel mostly by guess. The sun, too, was shut out by the tremendous atmosphere, and we could judge of our proper course only by observing the movements of the clouds, with the general range of the hills and the ravines, or inclination of the grasses. A broad expanse of unbroken snow lying on the rawhide to the course brought a chill tremor with the thought of crossing it. Yet go we must. It was no time to falter, when the fate of others perhaps depended upon our prompt advance. But the effort was no child's play. If we had experienced a tedious time during the former journey, could we now expect one? The whole interval of 30 miles was covered with snow that grew deeper and deeper as we proceeded. Every hollow and ravine was filled, and the route otherwise seriously impeded by huge drifts and embankments. We were frequently compelled to break footpaths for our animals, and even put upon them by main strength from the deep pitfalls into which they would plunge and become almost lost to view. In this manner, our progress was slow, the average depth through which we wading being but little less than 2 feet. The rising of the fierce head wind, piercing as the blast of Nova Zembala, drew the snow into our faces with mad fury and added immersively to our sufferings. Yeah, the snow was getting deep, people. In this manner, night shut down upon us, while yet far distant from say camping place, and such a night. Oh, storms and deadly winter, and fierce, how swept ye through the darkness sky, and with your awful howlings rendered the savage wilderness more wild. The creeping cold on every nerve played freely in haste to sting out vials and lay us each. Along the snow-stiffened course, strength out the bleaching in the northern blast. Let's see, and I think we will stop right there. How's that? I think that should do it for. Oh, we could go a little bit more and continue with the next chapter. How about that? We will finish this page. The impress of this event can never be emancipated in my mind. It was the night we arrived at the timberless court and struck camp. Our animals needed water, but we had neither axe or tomahawk to cut through the thick ice with which the creek was coated. As a remedy for this lack, all three of us advanced upon it, and by our united efforts at jumping, caused it a lengthy fissure with gentle encampments towards each shore, and left midway an ample pool. Having driven the cattle to this in their clumsy movements upon the ice, two of them fell, and sliding down the inclining plane, they lay struggling in the freezing water, unable to rise. Our only resort was to drag them to shore by main strength, for left in their then condition, they must have frozen to death in a very short time. Here commenced a series of pulling and wrenching that in our chilled and exhausted state we were ill prepared to endure. For a while our efforts proved vain. A backward slide succeeded each headway pull and vexed us with useless toil. Thus we worried for nearly 3 hours in water knee deep. Yeah, that's great. In the water knee deep in the middle of winter. At length, having procured a rope and fastening one end to the horns and the other around the pointed rock upon the shore, and gathering up the slack at each successive thrust, we finally succeeded in placing them both one after the other upon dry land. But now we were in a thrice sorry plight. Not a stick of wood could be raised far or near of which to build a fire. The great substitute of the prairies was so too deeply covered with snow to procurement, meaning buffalo poop. Anyway, our clothes, wet to the waist, were frozen upon us, and merciless wind with stinging keenness pierced us through in every breath, and stood us forth as living monuments of ice. Could men of iron endure such incomprehensible hardships, such inexpressible sufferings? Yet we survived them all. Spreading a few robes upon the snow, we lay down for sleep, dinnerless and supperless. We now seized with a chill which lasted for 2 hours or more, and so violent were the actions I could scarcely keep the covering upon me. My companions, however, though not similarly afflicted, were worse off than myself. One had his hands and ears frozen, and the other his hands and feet, the painful consequences of which, as the frost began to yield to the influence of generated warmth, were too apparent in their groans and witherings. Morning at length came, and the sun arose bright and clear. The winds had ceased, and the ragings in the clement atmosphere seemed pouring upon us the balsam and sympathy of miseries so recently endured. But their direful effects were not thus easily eradicated. The feet of one poor fellow were so badly frozen it was 3 months before he entirely recovered, while another lost a portion of one of his ears. As for myself, a severe cold settled in my teeth, producing an intensely painful ache and a swollen face that continued for 8 or 10 days. It seems almost miraculous that we should have escaped so easily and often after so long an interval. I shuddered at the recollection of this anguishing scene. 2 days subsequently we reached our destination and found all things pretty much in status quo. And there we go, people. What a trip that was. Boy, winter snow, middle of January, holy cow. Person could freeze to death, especially knee-deep water, blowing wind. Could you endure that? I don't know if I could. I'm tough too, at least I think I am. We're all pansies nowadays compared to those guys. Whew. Anyway, Well, thank you for joining me tonight and this story. Sorry it took a little longer than I thought, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Come back for next time, and remember, go out there and have your own